Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of the No-Frills Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Camps, and joining me tonight is my very special guest, Taylor Ashby. Taylor, welcome back to the show.
Hey Joe, it's good to hear from you again, and back. It's good to be back on the podcast with y'all, and I'm looking forward to kind of sharing some of the changes that have happened over here on my end of the education spectrum.
Yes, absolutely. So for those that are out there who you might remember if you listened to Season 1 of the podcast, I did have Taylor on in the past, Taylor Ashby, and now there have been some changes, and that kind of goes with the title of this episode, which is called The Virtual of Virtual School. So we got the virtues of virtual school with Taylor Ashby, and kind of tell us what happened between last season and this season, Taylor.
Well, I mean, at the end of last year, it's one of those kind of, I think I called it the golden apple hangover. Last year was just a grueling year with school and my own personal schooling and some things that were happening in my personal life with family and our health. And I mean, in the summer we hit a road bump once again, and it was probably the first time going into the school year that I wasn't necessarily excited about going back to physical schooling in the 11 years that I've been teaching. And I stumbled upon an opportunity that came up in July that would allow me to work for Florida Virtual School. And I put out an application saying, what the heck? I mean, if something happens, and I believe there was some form of divine intervention. And about 2 weeks into the school year, I was offered a job, and I started working with Florida Virtual School in August. And since the end of August, I've been teaching from home.
Now, how has that been with that transition? Because, like you said, 11 years, you're doing brick and mortar, you're day in, day out, you're having that FaceTime with your students, you're seeing your colleagues. And then now that you have this transition to the Florida Virtual School, are you still getting that interaction with those students, albeit, not face to face physically, but what does that look like compared to that daily interaction that you were having when you were in a brick and mortar school?
Like that is the probably one thing that I do kind of miss about the whole brick and mortar schooling is that you don't have the physical interaction with your students and your colleagues that you've been accustomed to. I mean, we're creatures of habits, and I think being a teacher, you have to be personable in some form of way. But getting into the actual, I guess you could say, communication and interaction with your students and really from their families, made it personable in different ways. You're still talking to families and really getting to know your students about their interests outside of school, because I've got students that are in virtual school for a multitude of reasons. Some of them are sick or they're hospital homebound. Some of them are competitive swimmers. Some of them are basically just trying to accelerate and finish their education quicker. And you really get the gist of what is going on with every student's family when you really work to communicate with the students. I mean, I still have the same number of students that I would have in a traditional school setting, but it gave me an opportunity to really know what is going on with each individual student's life. I think that's the one thing that I've enjoyed the most about the schooling is that you have more interpersonal relationships with the families and the students that you're working with. Because, I mean, we only have so much time in a day to communicate with our students, and we may not necessarily get everything that is going on with their students in their daily personal lives outside of our classrooms. So the transition was a tough one at first because I had to learn how to teach digitally, how to work multiple systems on a computer and through a phone. And I was a very hands-on teacher. A lot of the stuff that I did in the classroom was games, simulations. But you kind of get that personal aspect with communication, and that's been a nice transition for me, and it's kind of added a new skill set to my teaching.
I feel like you'd have to be self-motivated, and I'll just use myself as an example. As far as like any sort of online learning myself, just like a self-starter, self-motivated, and now I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize, for any ignorance with teaching virtual school. Um, I feel like when I go to work, obviously I have to force myself to get up. I got my alarm that goes off, get ready, get the kids ready, go to school. Like I know I have to be there at a certain time. I feel like if I were doing virtual, and I can only speak to when I was teaching during the pandemic, doing online hybrid, like getting up and kind of being motivated to kind of be on, like from the comfort of my own home. Is that a misconception that people have? Am I alone in this, or how did you have to adjust to this?
It was an interesting transition because early on I had to learn what my schedule would look like, and it was very different from waking up and getting ready to go to work before. I mean, I worked at a high school, so I was out the door before the sun came up. It was kind of it was creating a whole new routine, honestly, and I mean, I got the added factors of and benefits of being able to have breakfast with my wife and take my son to school. The only thing that really hasn't changed out of my routine is maybe an extra cup of coffee and not and getting to wear shorts now to work. But you're right about the self motivation aspect, because with teaching virtually, you control your schedule, and there are days where I would front load and I would spend more of my day on the phone or on my computer, communicating with parents and families. And there would be some days that I would work in breaks where I'd be able to go to the gym. Or I think one day Alex and I went and played pickleball one day. It's you're trying to find what works best for you, but at the same time, it is very daunting if you're not self motivated, because that's kind of the vehicle of the whole virtual school system is self-motivation. And that's something that we kind of instill in our students as well, because they're in control of how much or how little they do on a day-to-day basis.
And that actually brings up my next question. And I was thinking about that. Oh, once again, I could only compare it to my own experiences and once again, possible misconceptions. Do you feel that attendance is a bigger issue with virtual students because it is that they have to get on, or they have to have that self motivation to get on? Or do you feel that on a day-to-day basis you do have more, I say, compliance, I guess, with students being online or versus high school students that were coming in person? Sometimes, they might not show up or be late to class. Like, how have you noticed that? Because when I was doing virtuals, once again, I would have kids that would never sign on at all, but it was a very unique situation, obviously. So I know I'm comparing apples to oranges, but do you feel that getting kids online is harder, or these kids, like, they already want to be there because, they're enrolled at the virtual school for a reason, whatever it may be? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's unique because when we were teaching during the pandemic, and I was teaching kids both in class and online at the same time, and they honestly could have just turned off their monitor or they turned off their screen, and you would really have no knowledge as to whether or not they were in class or not. It's very different for every student, because I'll have students that are taking 4 or 5 courses online, and they've built a schedule where they work on one class a day. I mean, we have a recommended pace with how many assignments a student has to do a week, and they can do more or less, or the kind of amount that we suggest to kind of maintain the pace in the course, and it works to kind of each student. In terms of absenteeism, I mean, we're going to see that. With some students, and that's kind of just part of the schedule that I've built in, and is reaching out to families of students that maybe have not shown up or turned an assignment in the last week or longer, and trying to find ways to build in a plan to re-engage them or motivate them. And I mean, if things don't work out, then unfortunately sometimes those students don't continue with the class. It's it's very different for every student, because you'll have students that are in in school. They'll go to physical school during the day, and then they'll come home and they're taking your course to either accelerate or to make up credits that they could not fulfill in physical schooling. It's a unique situation for every student. I think the term absenteeism is kind of an odd one in this case, because there really is the student is in control of their absenteeism or their ability to log in this case. So I'll know when a student turns in an assignment or when they've logged in, and we kind of see, well, the student has been logging in, but they're not turning in assignments. What can I do to re-engage them and engage them successfully? So it's very different from the COVID model, but it's unique in its own way.
Is it more, okay, if I'm understanding, and once again, please let me know if I'm wrong. Is it more an assignment due date, not necessarily a daily check-in with the teacher?
So there will be days that I will reach out to students that are either new to the class or they've been in the class for a couple weeks. The goal is really to try to engage the students every other week. So I'll have days where I'll reach out to students that haven't turned in assignments, or they're ahead and they get like a kudos call, or like, hey, you're doing a great job. What else can I do for you? Do you need any help? Sometimes you're just checking in on students that you've created an action plan for to see what their progress has been over the last week. It's unique for every student situation. I think that's kind of what the model is encouraging, is that the flexibility of being able to learn virtually gives students a vehicle or an option to succeed where they may have not been able to. And like I said, it's unique for each student. Sometimes it's making up assignments, or sometimes they're working from home and then they've got a job at night, or they're a future NCAA student, or they're trying to qualify for them. I have a young man who's a USA swimmer in my
Wow.
course load, and he's basically swimming 3 hours a day in the morning. And then he's logging in and doing work at school, and then he's working as a lifeguard. So every situation is unique.
Oh, wow, that's pretty amazing to have students like that, that you get the opportunity to interact with and know that you're supporting them, with their education while they're
Mhm.
trying to pursue these dreams and, these goals that they may have. And I understand, like you had mentioned also, there are going to be students that are home that might be hospital homebound, might be ill for whatever reason. So to still be able to support those students, I
Mhm.
think is pretty, remarkable. Now, for those that are listening out, there on this podcast and they hear Florida Virtual School, can you explain to us, is this free tuition? Um, is it paid tuition, Florida Virtual School? Is it a charter school? Like for those that might not be aware.
So the model is unique because I do believe that our students do pay a tuition to be enrolled in the schooling. There are scholarships that are available for our students, but there is no set district for the school. It's not a charter school. It's basically kind of like a home. I wouldn't even call it a private school because many of our students are enrolled in public schooling. Um, and their, I guess, learning plan kind of applies to whatever district that student may be in. I've got students that are all the way up in the Panhandle, up in Panama City, and as far east as Jacksonville, and I've got students as far south as Key West. So everything that kind of falls in line with that particular district's uh, plan or curriculum map is kind of laid out in intertwined with our schools. I guess you call it an interface, but there is a cost to enroll your student. But I do have school students that are scholarship recipients that are enrolled through scholarship.
Okay. So it's not a matter of where the teacher, the educator yourself, per se, what district or like region you live in personally. It's like it sounds like you could have students from all across the state of Florida enrolled in your classes.
Yes, 100%. I think the trend that I've seen most of my students that are enrolled in my particular classes, I've seen a large percentage of my students from like St. Johns County and Duval County. So most of my students that I see are usually up in the Jacksonville area. You see a lot of students that are up in the, I guess you say the middle of the state. A ton of kids from Okeechobee. I get a lot of kids from the East Coast over near Homestead and Davie as well. And then I do have a couple of kids that are here in Lee and Collier County. So, but all of my students are somewhere within the state. It's just a matter of them being enrolled in the program and with the school. And uh, kind of us helping them with their particular needs.
Are you teaching just one specific grade, or do you have students from all across 9 through 12 or different subjects? What does your actual like course load look like, your workload?
So I'm still teaching the same thing that I taught in a brick and mortar school. I'm teaching world history at a high school level. So traditionally, most of my students are 10th graders. But I have students that are as young as 7th and 8th grade that are accelerating and trying to fulfill graduation requirements or high school credit requirements while they're still in middle school. And then I have students that are uh, juniors that are enrolled in the course and maybe they've moved from another state that need that particular class requirement. And then right now, especially this time of year, we're getting a lot of seniors being enrolled into our program because it's senior season and they need to fulfill a graduation requirement. So they may need to make up a semester of coursework in 2.5, 3 months so that they can graduate on time. So it's still the same content that I was teaching when I was with the school district of Lee County, but it's a wide range of students with different needs.
All right, so I'm thinking over here about doing the virtual school, and you had mentioned earlier having a little bit of time if you could have breakfast with your wife, your son, bring them to school, and kind of depending on how you work out your schedule. But then there are days that you're on your computer or on the phone that takes up all of
Mhm.
your time. Teacher burnout, such a big issue right now in education, and we had talked about previously, even when you were on the podcast last season and just kind of hitting that wall, so to speak. Do you feel now that we're what, quarter three of the school year, mid quarter three of the school year? Do you feel like the amount of stress or like the level of potential burnout is lower than, let's say, when you were going into a traditional school? Any Have you noticed any difference? I know it's new because, but how would you compare the two?
It's it's a different type of busy. I mean, I remember when I was, especially last year, I remember counting down the days to Christmas and spring break and the summer and just feeling exhausted. Um, and I think it comes from a multitude of things with school, with stress that comes with taking classes online yourself, with raising a family, with dealing with the situations that life throws at you. Being able to work from home, I was hesitant about it because I knew I would miss a lot of the physical aspects of school that I enjoyed, but I have never felt better. I feel refreshed. Yes, there are days where I'm busy and I'm tired sometimes at the end of the day, but I'm not catching the Sunday scaries when I leave school. I'm not worrying about whether or not I need to get into school early to set up a really engaging lesson. I feel at ease about knowing that I have more energy and opportunity to be engaged with things that are important to me, and that's being able to take my son to school in the mornings, to being able to make pancakes for breakfast during the week, being able to walk my dogs in the morning, and not really having to worry about some of the intricacies and bureaucracy that comes with education sometimes. And I mean, I was able to finish a master's degree all while working, and I don't know, it was the first time in a long time that I've really not felt stressed out about school. And I mean, it's a nice change.
I love it. Obviously we're doing this all on the phone, so you can't tell, but as you were saying all of that, I have this big smile on my face, and I swear this is the truth. Just because I'm so happy for you and, for your family, and just hearing, the difference and kind of how you feel going to this, and how you just, it's something that I wish that, we all could kind of experience. And you're right. I think many of us, we're all at a breaking point to some degree. Some of us, I know that I was talking to a colleague of mine a couple of days ago, and we're looking at each other and we're like, Yeah, it's time for spring break. Like you get to that point and the kids have hit that wall. They're waiting for spring break. They need spring break and we need spring break. And I just feel like because there's so much that's piled on the plates of the teachers in the school and just all of the extra. If I could just be in my classroom and I'm just teaching, like I'm having that's what I love to do. But it's meeting after meeting. Sometimes it's meeting for the sake of having a meeting, or it's
Mhm.
staying late for an after school event. And yes, those are all important things, and that is part of what goes with the job. But there are times when it's like too much. It's just too much. It's just too much. And then you're right. It's well, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. I'm like, oh man, I
Mhm.
got this all over again for another week. So it just makes me really happy to hear that you kind of experiencing that and having some of that time that's so valuable with your family right now. And the Masters, like, yes, congratulations. And where are we going with this? What's next for you?
So I just finished my master's about a week ago with the American College of Education. I think it was shortly after the Golden Apple. I kind of took the plunge and said, you know what can I do next? And the last 21 months, I've been working virtually with the American College of Education. I just finished my master's in educational leadership. Um, the big plan is to kind of take a break for a little bit. I'm kind of relishing finally being done before I have to open up another book. But the plan is probably sometime during the spring I'll begin studying for the Florida Educators Leadership Exam, and God willing, pass the Feely, and then start exploring my options. I don't know what it would look like in a virtual setting, but if I do come back to physical schooling, it would be in an administration position. Um, and that would probably be just kind of waiting to get into the assistant principal's pool here in probably in the fall, and kind of weighing my options and seeing what opens up and seeing if there's a school that and an administration team that catches my eye, and maybe making a leap here and kind of making things happen, if the situation is right for me and my family.
Oh, fantastic. And I know that they'd be very lucky, any school would be very lucky to have you as part of their administrative team and again to work with those teachers and bring in your expertise and knowledge of what you have and just that relationship building that really you're well known for in the community. Even before the Golden Apple in 2022, just I feel that that is sorely lacking sometimes with administrators. After a while, they lose. I don't want to say lose touch with, but I guess I'll word it this way: that sometimes when you're removed from the classroom for X amount of years, you kind of forget what it's like to truly build relationships with students, and even with colleagues. So I think somebody like you, that's a strength of yours that is much needed in our schools today. So I'm definitely rooting for you, and I'd love to see where this goes for you as well.
That's the goal, man. I want to go to a campus and re-energize it and be the woo factor and kind of really immerse myself in the culture of the school and the community, and uh, really remind my staff and my teachers that, I mean, I'm here for them and I know what it's like and down in the trenches, and I don't know, I want to make something special happen somewhere, and that's kind of the end game is that. And I mean, who knows what happens after that.
Well, talking about special, so I'm going to kind of change topic for a minute if you don't mind. You got to tell me a little bit more, tell the listeners a little bit more about what's happening with your wife, Alex, and uh, about Piper's Angels, I believe is the name of the organization. And can you kind of tell us? Uh, it's a pretty remarkable story. You guys were actually featured on the news, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, our story got picked up by Wink News probably about a month ago, and I mean, if you've met my wife, she's a firecracker. I mean, when she gets
Yeah, she's
involved,
awesome.
and when she gets involved with something, she doesn't tip her foot into the water. She cannonballs in, and she caught wind of this organization called Piper's Angels, which is on the east coast of Florida. They're a foundation that basically raises awareness for cystic fibrosis through an annual event they have every year called The Crossing. So the founder also has cystic fibrosis, and his daughter, named Piper, was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 4. And the founder's name is Travis. He started this foundation to raise awareness for cystic fibrosis and started an event about 10 years ago where they would gather at Lake Worth Beach, which is on the east coast of Florida, and they would basically caravan on boats over to the Bahamas. And they would be in the Bahamas for a couple days, and then on, I believe it's usually a Saturday night, but it would be Saturday night, so Saturday morning, they would launch by paddleboard or by kayak and paddleboard all the way back from the Bahamas to Lake Worth Beach. So Alex has been training for this event now for about 2 months. She's been paddleboarding all over the state. She's been on the East Coast paddleboarding with paddleboarders over in Jupiter. She just got back from a trip up in Homosassa Springs about a week ago. She's usually out on Matlacha once or twice a week paddleboarding. She's been down to Bonita paddleboarding. So she's all in for this event. She's gearing up for it. Basically, she's reached a fundraising goal already for the foundation, but we're now just in the midst of looking for sponsorship or funding for supplies, nutrition. We're looking for a captain and a boat, honestly. So if anybody that's got a boat out there that's interested in bunking up with us in the Bahamas for a couple of days before we head back to Florida, you can reach out to myself or Alex on Facebook, or you can check out our fundraising page on classy.org. I will be reposting that tonight through Facebook, Instagram as well.
Awesome. And then, of course, I'll, in the episode description for those that are out there listening as well, I'll post that link, any additional information. And then I guess if people find you, like you said, on Facebook, Taylor Ashby, you can find information as well to support. Who would not want to bunk up in the Bahamas for a few days, right? I think that'd be pretty fantastic.
It's basically looking at us like, hey, if you let us borrow your boat, you can hang out with us in, I don't know, we can go in Bimini for a few days, and we'll go snorkeling, go fishing, maybe sit by the pool and have a cold drink. I mean, before we have to haul back in the dark. So we need you so we don't get attacked by sharks, y'all.
Hell, makes me wish that Alexis and I had a boat. We'd be hanging out at the Ashby then in the Bahamas. That's pretty amazing to me.
It'd be the trip of a lifetime.
Yeah. So you said 80 miles, I believe. Alex is going to paddleboard.
She's going to paddleboard on a stand-up paddleboard for 80 miles. We'll be launching at midnight on the 22nd of June, and we should be arriving back on the east coast of Florida right around 4 o'clock p.m. So if anybody's interested, you can just reach out to myself or Alex, and we'll be posting our funding information and our fundraising page following the show.
That is insane. Good for her. That's so cool. Well, listen, I'll admit, I never been on a paddleboard before, and I've now this is my 19th year living in Florida, all down here in Southwest Florida since I moved from New York. I'm sheltered. I'll admit, like, listen, man, I've never been on a kayak. It's easy for me to tell you things I have never done. Never been on a kayak, never been in a canoe, never, yeah, never been on a paddleboard. Only went on a boat once I met my wife. So
We've got people that've got kayaks. We've got 2 paddle boards right now, man. I mean, I still wish we used to have a canoe. We got to get you out on the water, man.
the funny thing is that I grew up on an island. Granted, it's Staten Island, which whatever part of New York, and I don't know if I'd want to go in the water out there. But so Alexis be like, Joe, you grew up on an actual island. How have you like never done these things before? Like, I don't know. Like, I just never did it. I never had friends or family that wanted to go do these things. So very sheltered life. Now I know. Hook up with the Ashbys. I'm gonna go paddleboarding. I'm gonna go kayaking.
Let's go. We're probably going this weekend.
Listen, I'm still probably a little hesitant, but the second that Alexis hears this episode, She's like, what do you mean? Let's call them. Why don't we go out with them? So I guarantee you'll hear from me probably in the next 24 hours. I'll be like, all right, yeah, she heard the episode and you guys invited us. Camp Guitars in. Check. Got it.
Let's do it.
That's pretty awesome. Oh man. So you've been busy. So you do in the virtual school, you're taking care of your family, which you have a beautiful family, by the way. Your son and your wife and very blessed. And you're doing, Alex is getting ready to do the Piper's Angels, this 80-mile thing. But besides finishing your master's and doing the virtual school and all these things, like, talk a little football. Like, I know you got something going on. You have your own show, a part of a show. Like, can you give us a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, so honestly, just started out as two guys that haven't talked in a while. I actually grew up here, and Mac Wallace runs a small sports interest page, basically called Recliner Sports Reporters, and he would basically talk about games and kind of like odds with other colleagues. And on Tuesdays, I hit him up and said, why don't we just start a weekly segment about kind of like the big things that have been going on in the NFL? And I mean, I grew up, honestly, football was probably one of the big reasons why I got into education. Honestly, the coaching aspect of it was something that really drove me to teaching high school specifically. But the NFL has kind of been ingrained in my blood. I think one of my earliest childhood memories is watching Brett Favre play John Elway in the Super Bowl. But every Tuesday, we would basically talk about the big stories in the league. And we would break down some of the bigger games, some disappointments, major injuries, coaching changes. I mean, and I'm not going to boast or anything, but we were kind of spot on this year on some of our predictions. We predicted that Lamar Jackson was going to win the MVP 6 weeks into the season. We knew the Detroit Lions were going to make a run basically almost to the Super Bowl this year. And I think it was right around the Christmas game, we kind of knew that Kansas City was going to flip the switch and make the run to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, every Tuesday we basically just talk football for about 45 minutes and kind of sound like pundits, and hopefully we were right about what was going to happen during the week. And now that we're kind of on a break, it's kind of getting ready to see what happens with the combine and player evaluations and free agency coming up, and seeing if either of our teams can make some moves this year. He's a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan, and I myself, I love the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we're going to be kind of keeping our eyes open on players and moves that are going to be made, and see if anybody can give the Chiefs a run for their money next year.
I gotta say, the Bucks, they were a nice surprise this season. I mean, I'm not a Bucks fan, but it was hard to not root for them.
It was honestly really surprising. Honestly, this year watching kind of Tampa flip the switch. I think it was probably about week 11 when they went on a skid where they lost about 5 of their last 6 games, and I said it's time to tank. Yeah. And then something happened, and they ended up ripping off a couple of wins to squeak into the playoffs, and then, I mean, they shocked everybody beating the Eagles the first week, and they gave the Lions a great game in the divisional round. It's going to be interesting for all my Bucs fans out there, because we've got some players that we got to re-sign. We got to bring back Baker Mayfield. He's going to be asking for a lot of money. He definitely proved it this year.
He's earned it.
And then Mike Evans. I've heard some kind of rumors. I mean, he's going to need to get paid, and I've heard some rumors that he's linked to your New York Jets, Joe. So
I would love that. Would be fantastic. We need somebody. So I'm going to put you on the spot right now. But the Super Bowl early prediction next year's Super Bowl. Who's going?
So Super Bowl is going to be in New Orleans next year, and it's going to be hard to top Kansas City next year. But I think that if they remain healthy next year, it is going to be Patrick Mahomes' Achilles heel, which is Joe Burrow. I think it's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals representing the AFC next year, especially if they can stay healthy. And I think it's going to be the Battle of the Cats. I think that the Detroit Lions are going to take that final step and finally give the fans in Michigan what they've wanted for so long, seeing the Lions in the Super Bowl. And I think that it's going to end with Joe Burrow getting his first ring storyline. I know how the
Yeah.
NFL loves their storylines. He won his national championship at LSU in New Orleans at the Superdome. Where's the Super Bowl next year? It's at the Superdome.
You know, I'm with you on the Lions. My heart says Jets. Oh no, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but my head says,
If Aaron can stay healthy next year, they could be interesting. Buffalo. I think their window is closing, but you got to deal with the Dolphins too.
that's it. Dolphins. I was going to say my head says possibly Buffalo, although Baltimore's going to be a tough out. I mean, it's going to be really competitive. The Bengals, if they're healthy, they're going to be a tough out. But I just, yeah, if we don't get an offensive line for the Jets, they got to really work on that. I mean, otherwise they're not going to make it to the playoffs. But they're building talent with Bruce Hall and Garrett Wilson. I mean, they got some players. If they got somebody like Evan, sorry for the Bucks, but that'd be a fantastic upgrade for the Jets to complement Wilson.
I think that would be a great pickup for them too as well. But you're right. I mean, New York, they couldn't protect I think they went through 4 quarterbacks this year. So I mean, the offensive line is going to be their main focus probably in the draft. So that's where I'm looking at with the AFC. But the AFC, like you said, is very tough with so many young, talented teams and quarterbacks. And like you said, Miami, Buffalo, Cincinnati,
Houston.
Houston. I mean, yeah, CJ Stroud this year.
Yeah.
They could take a step next year, and then Anthony Richardson coming back with Indianapolis could be an interesting team. You got Trevor Lawrence with the AFC is loaded with
it's stacked with talent, especially at the QB position. Well, what is the name of your segment or show? Like if somebody wants to check that out, obviously after they listen to the No-Frills Teacher podcast, but they want to check out, your segment, your show, Recliner Sports. Like, how can they find you guys?
So the page is run by Mac, but it's called Recliner Sports Reporters. I will probably be plugging in a segment on Tuesdays right around noon, especially as we get closer to the combine and free agency. I believe free agency is going to be starting here probably in the next 2 weeks, where the franchise tags can be placed on specific players. But as we get closer to the draft, we'll start doing some draft analysis here and looking at some of the future college players and stars that we think are going to be game changers for teams. I mean, my wife's Chicago Bears have the number 1 pick in the draft this year, so we're very interested to see what they do there. But it is called Recliner Sports Reporters. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok.
So definitely worth checking out. Like I had watched a few episodes that you guys had shared on Facebook, so that's why I want to kind of bring it up here because for you guys to get a little plug, a little shout out. So those that are listening out there to this episode, definitely worth checking out. Once again, anything that Taylor shares, I'll be happy to share as well, along with this episode. So what's new? I'm going to kind of circle back as we start to kind of wrap up this episode back to the virtual school. As of now, unless you get into the AP pool and kind of see how that's going, circling back, what does next year look like? Like we're sticking with Florida virtual. We're liking where we're at. Do you get the same vacation time, summer vacation as other people? Then like, is the plan if you don't go into the AP pool just quite yet that you'll continue the same kind of role position next year?
That's the game plan right now. Now, since I'm teaching in a flex position year round, I don't have much vacation time. I actually don't have a spring break. So because so many of my students are on different spring breaks with the district. And then my summer is basically limited to about a week and a half right around the 4th of July. But the flexibility of the position, and I think with the summer things start to slow down a little bit. You aren't going to see as many students in your course, and there's kind of on a particular pace that works for them. And as of right now, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. It's going to be kind of just seeing what this position takes with me. I know in the fall we have our annual conference in Orlando and kind of be reinvigorated by that again. But the game plan is to kind of have my cards laid out where I want them. If something does come up in the AP pool in the next year and a half or so, it might be an opportunity that I want to take. And as my son gets a little bit older, I mean, he'll be 5 next year, so he's getting closer to kindergarten, and it would probably be a good time for me to maybe make a transition. But as of right now, I like being at home in my shorts and working. So I'm not going to complain about not having to wake up at 4:45 in the morning and rush out the door. So I'm very happy with where I'm at, but I do miss all my colleagues and friends and students that are over at North Fort Myers High School. So shout out to y'all, Big Red Nation. And then getting the opportunity to see y'all out and about in the community. But hey, that's what these banquets and socials are for, and being able to kind of just catch up with everybody.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you at the Golden Apple Banquet, you and Alex, when that comes up as we kind of celebrate the next group of Golden Apple recipients for the Foundation for Lee County Public Schools, Inc. So very exciting times. Well, Taylor, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you tonight. I love hearing always what's going on in your life and seeing the things that you guys share on Facebook. Wishing lots of luck to Alex with the paddle boarding, and we'll definitely be taking you guys up soon, I'm sure, to get together and get the kids together and all that. So, uh, everything best of luck with the AP process. Deciding to move into the AP pools, and I'm very happy for you with the virtual teaching. Um, yeah, just keep being the rock star that you are. For those that are out there, you guys make sure to check out the fundraising page for Piper's Angels. Once again, once Taylor shares that information, I'll post it also for this podcast in the description. Definitely check it out. Recliner Sports. Make sure you also check out his segment um, as we get closer to the combine and the draft and all those things. Um, Busy times, but great times. Taylor, once again, thank you so much for being a guest tonight on the podcast.
Joe, thanks again, man. It's always so good catching up with you. I mean, like I said, man, we'll bring the boards. You guys bring the pub subs, and we'll make a day out of it. If you're not moving, you ain't living. So you guys keep on moving, you keep on living, and it's always great to catch up with you, Joe. We look forward to seeing you guys very, very, very soon.
Same here, my friend. Well, everyone, that's it for tonight. This is season 2, episode 11 of the No-Frills Teacher Podcast, the virtuals of virtual school, featuring Taylor Ashby. You all have a good night. Take care.